I'm here today with Jack Wicks, a good friend of mine. He's the co-founder of the Social Housing Group, and we are going to be talking all things social housing. So if you're interested in social housing investment or development, make sure that you listen to the rest of this video because we've got some really, really good golden nuggets coming your way. Jack, thanks for meeting up with me.
Thank you, mate. You're guessing that they're good.
I know they're going to be good. I know they're going to be good. Yeah. But Jack, so tell us a little bit about yourself, the Social Housing Group, for those listeners that may not have heard it or heard about you before.
Yeah, so I have been in property for, I think it's like 11 years now. I've done everything in property wrong.
You only look 18.
Yeah, well, I get both sides. I was with someone yesterday and you went, "You're 34," and I was like, I don't know if you're being nice or not here.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to go off topic, but it's a great story. I've got to jump in and say it. Relevant to this, but if you like a joke, then listen to it.
Oh, no.
So I went for a heart checkup recently, and I was with my 6-year-old son, and we were sat there, and I did my echocardiogram and did the ECG, and I had to wait and see the cardiologist. And as I was doing this, the young girl came in. She was like a teenager, sat next to me. Somehow she was called in before me, but whatever. We'll leave that issue to the side. Cardiologist comes out, picks up the thing, says her name, walks in, looks at me and says, "You a dad?" I said, "I don't think I look that old." Normally I guess I said I look young, but all of a sudden I must have aged 20 years. So it probably does feel.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Anyway, sorry, back to you, Jack.
So yeah, I've just the shiny penny thing. Not really spending enough time focusing on the purpose side of the business, which I think is really important, especially when people are starting out, to understand you can make money in a million different ways. So rather than going to the guy that's on Instagram with a car, thinking that that's the life you want, focusing on what you want to fix and what you can be excited about doing in 10 years' time and still be coming to London for podcasts when you've got a shit ton of work to do. I've sworn already. You need to know that this is just part of what you need to do every single day and try and make that enjoyable. By choosing the right thing to do. And so I was chasing the money, I was chasing the next big strategy that was, limited time only, service accommodation, it's not going to be around forever, do this thing. And I messed up every single time because I didn't really care. Yeah,
because you're just chasing the money.
Yeah, and I think I always say that money's only important when it's important. So money's important when you need to put food on the table and pay your rent. Anything over and above that, it becomes really pointless.
So down Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? We've got that base foundation sorted: food, shelter, water, clothing, essentials.
Yeah.
The rest of it actually doesn't increase happiness, so to speak.
Yeah.
But proportionally.
Yeah, I think people always talk about that 10 grand a month number, and that's kind of like the life most people want. And I think that's probably high up there, even in today's standards. Yeah. But it really does. Like I find it really strange that people think they're better than other people because they have more money. I find it really strange, that concept. It's really weird to me. So yeah, we basically, long story short, second deal I ever did, lost over 100k because I invested with ego. I just wanted to tell everyone I bought this amazing big house.
What type of deal was it? Sorry.
It was delayed completion. All it did was delayed my misery, essentially.
Buzzwords.
I basically just trusted the agent. I trusted the agent, didn't get any builder's quotes. Didn't even get a survey. It was a grade 2 listed block of 10 flats and shop.
Wow.
Seafront.
Ballsy.
Yeah, I didn't know what grade 2 listed was at the time. 750 grand. And we thought that was cheap. I basically fell in love with this old building, it had winding staircases and all this amazing stuff, seafront. It was in Hastings, if you stand in the high street, you can see that building, and that was what I wanted to just tell everyone.
Standing in the street, you see that building?
Yeah.
I own that.
Yeah, just taking pictures of it, that's right. So yeah, that was the biggest, most humbling experience that I'm really glad happened. Because it made me realise that that's other people's money you've risked, being cocky and trying to make yourself look great.
Yeah, because I'm guessing in that strategy or in that investment, you followed the well-known path of researching a particular strategy that's hot at the time, raising money from an investor, and buying it and crossing your fingers.
Yeah. Basically, I'd done one project before, and it went really well, so I knew everything.
Yeah, because even when you know a lot and experience, you still make mistakes.
Yeah. Well, markets changed. Every deal's different with property. That's the difficult thing. It's never, everyone always says cookie cutter. It never is, because you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
That's the problem with property, a big one.
Yeah.
It's people.
Yeah.
And you can't change people. People are unpredictable. People always, the best tenant in the world can turn bad because of circumstantial changes or differences or things in their life. Builders, all of these main problem things are normally people-based, and it doesn't matter what deal you do. If it's the identical house next door to one you've just done, that experience is going to be different. The negotiation is going to be different. The work's going to be different. There'll be something underneath you've not seen, or behind the wall, or something else. So it's really unpredictable, and that was no different. So that humbled me really quickly. I was already.
So that was your second deal in there.
Second deal, yeah.
Second deal, lost 100 grand.
Yeah.
Real honest of you. And what did you do from there? Because a lot of people who get into property and lose money, obviously they get scared and retreat straight away and actually think, because you can lose money, and obviously it happens more often than people think.
Yeah, well, I had no choice. For me, I was working in a bar before that, so that's what I did. I worked my brother was my only employer, I think, up until that point. And I loved it, by the way. I actually missed that job a little bit. But I was like, well, I've lost this money, it needs to be paid back. And I ain't going to do it at 10 quid an hour, working in the local pub. So I'm in now. Property's the thing, because the property can get you in a lot of trouble, but it can also get you out. So you can lose a lot, you can get a lot.
So with that money, that carried forward loss, which is again a real good point. The only way for you to have paid that back is by doing another deal.
Yeah. It basically just went, this is you now. You're done, you're in.
You've made your bed, Jack.
Yeah, exactly. But at the time, I'd quit my job and started sort of project managing the previous deal. And I'd started looking at doing rent to rent for cash flow, because again, money going into a deal, you're not going to get it out for 9 months or whatever it may be if you're lucky. And so I was doing rent to rent, started going quite well, getting a few deals over the line. So we knuckled down on that to be able to pay a wage and then start paying back the investors and stuff. One thing I'm really proud of is it's not the only time we've lost money. We've lost money in serviced accommodation. Lost about 60 grand on a big deal there.
I lost 50,000 in serviced accommodation.
Yeah, so, worst strategy ever. I'm really trying hard not to swear, but I hate it. There's been other times where I've again gone into strategies because people are making money, saying it's easy. Service accommodation is great because you can just get other people to do it, and I lost money there. But we never allowed the investors of any deal to lose out.
Right.
And that's something that I think has stood us in really good stead moving forward. Because there were times I went in on a JV on the service accommodation thing. So the guy invested, but we did it together. I see, But the decisions I made were the reason we lost the money. So it didn't sit right with me to go, well, you were in that.
That's it, you were equity,
which I could have done. So we set up a payment plan with him, and it was last year that he got paid out. And that included interest we were paying on the money that he kept in. And it kind of worked for him in that structure. So again, that guy there, although it wasn't a good experience, he's also not lost money with us.
Yeah, that's good.
And knows that we dealt with it in the right way, even though I was, what would I have been then, like 28 maybe? So relatively young in property years. I always think it's like dog years, property. That just leaving people going, well, it didn't go right, but he dealt with it in the right way is really important to me.
That's very important, and I've been through exactly the same, and especially in early deals where you will make so many mistakes, and sometimes the market will go against you as well. But all of the investors that I've worked with in some deals that have lost money, they've always been repaid with a return that they're happy with and confirmed happy. So never burn those bridges, especially in today's world. Well, I couldn't do that morally anyway, but in today's world, you're only one Google search away from the truth nowadays. Really. And
it's communication, I think. Again, if I'm an investor and something goes wrong, I just want to know what's gone wrong. What's the plan of action? How are we gonna fix this? And I'm happy to jump in and help too.
And I'm guessing now every time that you work with a new investor, you're now more prone to explain the downsides and what would happen if that happened. What were you going to do about it? So they know that if it does come up, and it's obviously the most unfortunate event, deal goes wrong, you don't make the profit you think, people start, even worst case, losing money. But they've already been prepped for that. You've had that. The worst thing is going into a deal, over-promising, and not even under-delivering, but absolutely failing, which does happen sometimes. Then managing that relationship is 10 times harder.
100%. Yeah, and I talk about this like about people starting their business. I think it's a very positive way of thinking to go, what in our business right now can go wrong? Everything you can possibly think of, like you wouldn't have thought of COVID, fair play, but and, you know, anything outside of that, anything along the lines of like, what if the project burns down? What if we get squatters? What if this? What if that? And try and think of absolutely everything within your business that could go wrong, and come up with a number of solutions or plans to fix that should that happen. That's
risk management.
The level of like freedom you feel when you do that, and nobody does it because they don't want to think about and that was me when I started. It was like, I'm so positive and excited and self-confident that I cannot see a world in which this doesn't go perfectly every time.
Yeah, and then anybody that gives you that advice classed as a hater. They're just a hater.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But okay, so you know, real good points there. And for anybody listening as well, it's entering into this space or looking to. There will be these challenges. So your first deal, then you went on to rent, and then how did you get into social housing, and how did social housing group, you know, develop?
Yeah, so that was a strange one. So me and my business partner met just before COVID, and decided to work together during COVID. So it was about, I think it was 2 years before we met in person. Started the business within COVID, just Zoom calls.
Just Zoom?
Yeah, literally.
Connected through your previous networks, was it? Or?
Yeah, so I hired Kevin as in his old business, which was systems and outsourcing. So me and business partner are like, he's a 0 and I'm a 10. We're complete opposites. He wants to sit in a dark room and do spreadsheets. I get spreadsheet blindness. I literally can't see numbers on screen. We're so opposite, which works. But so I hired him to systemize our rent-to-rent business, and then didn't implement any of it. But he was a property person anyway before, and so that kind of was the natural way. He basically rang up and said, "I've quit my old business. Let's do property together," and that was it. We were doing deal sourcing and had a few people asking about social housing. Started looking into that, and we were like, wow.
So the rent-to-rent you did wasn't social housing originally?
Not at the time, no. So I sold that rent-to-rent business. 3 months after that, I found out about social housing and looked at what that rent-to-rent business would have been making, and I was like, no.
What did the rent-to-rent business, what was it? Rent-to-rent HMO? Rent-to-rent SA?
Rent-to-rent HMO in Surrey, so we had a lot in Woking, Guildford, Ashford, Staines, those sorts of like round the airport, really quite affluent.
So that is, just for layman's terms, well, you can explain it. So you go to agree to rent a property from a landlord, and then targeted areas where permit development rise from C3 to C4?
Correct, yeah. So we were doing over 2 floors, typically 3 or 4 beds to 6 beds. And we do that with no planning, and then we
rent out the rooms individually.
Yeah, made it look nice, rented it out to professionals, all bills included, etc. And then you realise you are a babysitter for adults. And it was hell. Chasing rent, you got them all like arguing around whose piece of bread it is, and like playing buckaroo with the bins, whoever's going to take the bins out last, and
I want the top shelf in the fridge.
Yeah, just loads of petty stuff. That I was just, you can deal with that when you're at the start and you're all excited. You can deal with that stuff because it's like, this is better than the job I was in, and I'm building something. It gets really boring really quick. So then we sold that business. 3 months later, I found out about social housing, and we're like, we could have done that on that. Had none of the stress, housed a ton of people that needed it, and made a solid, specific, predictable income.
So how does that work then? How would the stress level be different? Because I understand, you take a house and either through planning or permit development, you can now fill that, you can now rent the rooms individually, subject to obviously building control and all the other regulations, HMO licensing, etc. But ultimately, you've got a 3-bed house, you can turn out to a 5 or 6 bed individual rooms, rent them out, and manage those tenants individually. Great. How is it different for social housing?
So we're renting to a company, a charity, a council, and they are our contract. So it could be 6 individual tenants, but we have one contract with the provider, and they will then go and manage their tenants. They will pay the bills, they will deal with any damages, etc. So we get it to the level that they require,
Yeah.
And then it's signed off by that provider. They say, yeah, this is good enough for us. We'll take that on. They sign a lease as opposed to a tenancy agreement.
Great, okay.
There's a load of benefits to that because you don't have to go through all the nightmares that tenancy normal ASTs have now.
Yeah. It's there's a lot more protection for an AST under residential laws versus a lease, which is more commercial based, business to business type of thing.
Yeah, there's pros and cons for both. Obviously, if you're dealing with a company, they're essentially subletting it, and then you've got random tenants in there. So if anything were to happen, you're going to have a situation where you've got tenants you don't know. But we work with typically government-based agencies and people who are paid by the government under contract.
So these registered providers then?
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, not always, but in the most part. Yeah.
So you have, so they're your client or the customer, and they've got a waiting list behind them of, like, what type of demographic or individuals do they put into these, or do they house?
Yeah, so it does depend. The main government contracts that people will have heard of are going to be asylum seeker based contracts.
Right, okay.
But that does trickle down to all sorts of other stuff as well. It's not just predominantly that.
Yeah.
That could be, we do a lot of temporary accommodation now with blocks of flats and stuff.
Yeah.
That pays a lot higher rate because they've got people in hotels.
Which is really expensive.
It's expensive, it's just not fit for purpose. That's my main driver for trying to bring on more blocks. Is like, imagine a family of 5 in a bedroom in a Holiday Inn.
It's terrible.
And people would be like, oh, that'll be alright, coming over here and getting a hotel. It's not suitable, it's not fit for purpose. Nobody would want to sit in a hotel room with their kids and their family for a long period of time. It's rubbish. So the government will be willing to pay almost hotel rates, but give you suitable accommodation, a 2-bedroom flat, and actually give them half a chance of actually moving forward with their lives.
It's a stable.
Yeah, otherwise they feel like they're just stuck in the middle in this like no man's land.
Yeah.
Stuck in the middle, can't really move on, can't do anything proper. So that's where we get a lot of really nice blocks of flats. Commercial conversions, newly done stuff, new builds. Most people don't think about that being social housing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But because we're getting that higher rate, which still helps, it's still less than the hotels charge, but it's just suitable accommodation. So we've gone with that a lot, and that's a sort of like a main core of our business offering.
So you sold your rent-to-rent business. 3 months later, you found out that actually you have this after you've done your research, that would have been perfect for your rent-to-rent business.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's gone. So now you've set up a new company then, Social Housing Group.
Yep.
So in a nutshell, what is the Social Housing Group and its objective?
So we want to house 1 million vulnerable people in the UK. That's our main top line thing. And the minute I did that, I mean, we used to be called Property Empire.
Property Empire?
Yeah, it's like couldn't be further apart from what we do.
It doesn't sound social housing.
Yeah, well that was it. I mean, I spent a lot of time working on why I'm doing this stuff. Like, why are you actually doing it? You know, when you get bored, again, looking at houses and another thing, and you start getting this automated, it all sounds great. The passive income, everyone loves the idea of. Yeah. So boring, and you feel like you've retired, and retiring is no fun because you've lost purpose. So I did a lot of work on like, what do I actually want to do, and I was trying to look at new stuff again. And then I looked backwards and was like, hold on a minute, we've housed like 300 people that want somewhere safe to live, somewhere suitable to live, and a fresh start of life. I was like, that's it. Yeah. That's the thing that I want to do. And I remember like vividly going, we were due to have a meeting in Covent Garden, and I went into a coffee shop and this thing just went off in my head, like those light bulb moments where you're just like, I need to get my laptop out anywhere. And that's where I wrote down Social Housing Group. I wrote down, I want to house 1 million people, that's our aim. I wanted it to be a number that was like...
Must have been something in the coffee, was it?
Yeah, I'd have to go back there.
You have to go back.
It was in Amsterdam. It's one of those numbers, like, I always remember the story, I think it was Microsoft, where their goal was to put a laptop computer in every house in the world or whatever it was. And it's a little bit like that for me. I want it to be so ridiculously out of reach, in a way unachievable, but strive for it anyway. So we put the 1 million number on, which I believe now is 100% achievable. It'll take a long time and a lot of collaborations, and that's a big part of our business, is collaborating with people rather than going against them. But in that room I just started writing these things down. How do we do it? Who can we collaborate with that can get us to that 1 million people quicker?
So what if how many homes are you at now? How many people have you housed at the moment?
We're working on, we've got all like new systems and stuff at the moment, so we're working out the specifics, but we're over 1,000 at this point.
Over 1,000?
Yeah.
The first 1%?
Yes, yeah. That makes me feel worse.
I'm sure I don't actually know if this is true, because you know what the media does, but I'm sure the founder of Gymshark, there was a quote or something, and it said, in business, like £1 billion, you know, whatever it is, your first 5 million's the hardest.
yeah, great.
Yeah. So, all right, okay.
Yeah, it's a monumental task, but I think there's going to be a point where, you know, the momentum kicks in. I'm sure there will be a moment where we start getting news talking about it, and you know, social housing is a big buzzword right now as well. Yeah, definitely.
But there's a huge waiting list.
Yeah.
I mean, the stats that I know, and you may have different stats, but in Wales there's 90,000 people on the social housing waiting list, and there's nearly 11,000 people in temporary accommodation just in Wales, including children. And in England there's over 1.2 million people on the housing waiting list. I don't have the temporary accommodation numbers for England. And I know Scotland comparably have, if you know, from a percentage point of view, similar stats.
Yeah.
So we're talking about well over 1.3 plus million people on the waiting list. And every year that goes up, and we're not building or providing homes to even cover half of how much the annual need is.
Yeah.
So we are in a crisis because of that, I would say.
People always ask me, like, do you think this is still going to go? I'm like, yes. Yeah. And what about governmental change? Doesn't matter. Yeah. It's really irrelevant. There's still people on the streets. There's still people, and that's only going to get worse with the cost of living and all this other stuff. That does not bother me in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously Cast Group is also a social housing focused company. We, based in South Wales, but have aspirations to expand across the UK. Also have a goal that's, on the face of it, you would say is kind of unachievable, but I'm like you, I want to make the biggest impact possible. I don't believe that things aren't really achievable. All the biggest PLCs all started, and the house building companies all started with their first house. And your Cast Group's mission in Wales is to hand over between 300 and 500 homes every year for social and affordable, genuinely affordable and disabled adapted homes in collaboration with housing associations and local authorities. But we're a development company, so we find land, we know where the requirement are for the waiting list across the area, we forward sell effectively, we get planning and then sell the land and get a build contract, and we deliver those predominantly new build homes or apartments or bungalows out, and we've done some conversions, and we want to have, you know, each region across the UK, over 10 regions, all doing 300 to 500 a year, building thousands of homes a year. So, you know, obviously we're on the development side, which has a whole set of different challenges. So how do you, because a million's a lot, it's a huge number, and 1,000 so far is also a huge number so far. How do you do that on scale, and like, how does the model work? How are you?
So there's multiple things, again, with a main core thing of our business is collaboration.
Right.
You know, you're talking about that. I'm sure there'll be parts that if we were to collaborate on something, we could help your mission much quicker. And it's not going to take anything away from your business. Mm-hmm. It's going to add to it. And I think that's a really important thing, especially when you're dealing with a purpose-driven business.
Yeah.
If I help you house more people and it doesn't give us anything, then I'm still good with it. We've still been a part of housing more people. Yeah. So there's such a big problem. We're never going to solve it on our own. Mm. And I think a lot of social housing is coming out now because everyone's been gatekeeping these contracts and trying to keep it to themselves, which is so selfish when you think about it. They're gatekeeping the housing of people that need housing because they want to keep the contract and the money and the collaboration's massive. So we have a partnership program that we've built, so we've got over 150 partners now. Right. We help them build personal brands, use social media to find investors who then invest in our deals.
So they don't operate under the social housing group, they have their own brand?
Alongside us. So they have their own company, but it's in partnership with Social Housing Group. Okay. We help them learn about everything social housing. Mm-hmm. We then feed them our deals so that they have something tangible to go to an investor and have those conversations. So they learn how to raise money too. Okay. And they raise money for us, we pay them commissions. The investors then fund the blocks of apartments that we do to temporary accommodation.
Okay. So yours is a partnership-based model then, which makes sense to do 1,000 and definitely 1 million. I'm guessing you're targeting the entire UK then?
Yep.
Wales, England and Scotland?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you bring on a partner, you provide them the required training, they find an opportunity, because all of these deals revolve around pipeline of deals, pipeline of money, and then execution, basically, isn't it? It's the three key things of really this business model, same as ours. So you teach them the fundamentals of those 3 things, and then they go out and either find money for the live deals that you have, or if you have deals and they can, or if they find a deal and it's like vice versa, is it?
Finding a deal is based around having a provider to find it. What we
yes,
don't want to be is a random
yeah.
deal sourcing company.
Yeah.
We want our job to be specific around social.
Yeah.
And the issue we have is social housing providers, supported living providers, they're not businesses.
Yeah.
They're not business minded, they're care minded.
Yeah.
Which is great in the fact that they're caring about people. But when we say, what house do you want? Where do you want it and what can you pay? It's like silence.
Yeah.
Whereas if we had a list from every provider saying, right, we need 10 homes in this postcode with this size garden and this here, and we'll pay this much money, we'll get 150 people going and finding that, and we'll find it very quickly. So we're working on building almost like a lease matchmaking service.
Yeah, it's like that criteria, It's the same for the development, is that the LPs don't necessarily have that list available, but just through relationship building and obviously trial and error, it takes a bit of time. We start developing that our own criteria for that housing association or local authority, and our land team now know what areas to look for, what sizes, who operates in that area, and then every time we get a lead, first thing we do, as you said, is demand led. Take it forward. We've got this potential opportunity. Do you require homes in this area? If the answer is yes, can move on. But you're right. If you had 150 people all trying to do that to the providers, that would be a nightmare. So they funnel everything through to yourself, and obviously you have the qualified lead. They help try to find the investment. When you say investment, like what's the typical investment required to do a deal like this?
So it does vary depending on the deal, the area the deal's in, etc. But it normally hovers from 12 to 20k.
Okay.
Somewhere in the middle there. Because what we do is almost like a wholesale to retail model.
Yeah.
So we'll take the block on in its entirety.
Yeah.
Pay out all the money. Sometimes we'll back fund it, sometimes we'll pre-fund it.
Yeah.
But then we make it available for investors that don't have £1 million to invest. We make it smaller. So let's say we have a block of 100 units. We'll pay out that whole amount to get that secured. We'll add a fee on for ourselves, and then we'll sell an investor a individual unit, and they'll get the income from that individual unit. So we actually give all of the income to the investor of the deal, and we just take a fee on top, which pays for our partners and pays for us to continue running the business so that we can reinvest.
I see. So you have so you take on the full block, and this is a lease now, right?
Yeah.
So you take a lease on the block of like 100. You would then try to sell those leases effectively for that term.
So we create individual leases. So we have one overhead lease, and then we'll create individual contracts with our investors.
So this is a lease-based contract arrangement between investor and yourself, and for a defined term. How long do these leases typically last for?
So at the moment they're 3 years. They were 5, but typically they're 3. I think the providers are being a little bit cautious on that. I think they have this grand idea that the government are going to have a plan of getting them into like long-term accommodation.
What do you think now with Labour in? Do you think it'll improve the system, or?
I'm not the right man to ask. I turned the news off during COVID and I haven't put it on ever since.
Well, the taxi we had over here, I listened to more on the news, and it was blasting the news actually. And it was all negative.
Well, I've learned from my dad. My dad sits there getting really annoyed. And just winds himself up, and I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? So I've just decided, that's it, I'm turning it off. But obviously it's relevant. I just don't think social housing is going to be affected, so I'm not too bothered, if I'm honest. I think no matter what government's in, they've still got people that need housing.
I mean, just look at the numbers.
There's no policy where they're going to go, let's not house them.
The number one rule of a government, especially our type of government, is to protect the vulnerable. And social housing and emergency housing, they are, it's classed as they need assistance, government assistance. That's what the number one rule of the government is to do, as well as to manage everything else. So what's like the biggest challenge at the moment you're seeing in the sector? And social housing, the word social housing, it carries a stigma. Do you have much of an issue with that?
No, I don't. Not an issue. I mean, again, there's not enough people discussing it. There's not enough people talking about it and explaining it. People in property think that everybody knows about property.
Yeah.
That's a weird thing about our industry. Like, what do you mean you don't know all these acronyms and all these things? Like, nobody goes down to basics to explain to people that social housing is a massive sector with so many different individual parts. Yeah. And as a landlord, you might be thinking, social housing, no thank you, I'm going to have to deal with a tenant that doesn't have an income, they're going to smash it up, blah, blah, blah. But obviously we have that overriding contract at the top.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't go into that, not because we don't want to, but because it's not scalable enough for us to hit 1 million people if we're self-managing individual tenants with, again, most of them are classed as social, but I would argue a lot of them needed more support than just being put into a property. But the government go, oh, we can't do that. Please house them, otherwise if we say they've got a mental health issue, you're not going to do it. So they haven't. And then they put people in. I mean, my business partner has a tenant that the council said, no, he doesn't need any additional help. He's absolutely fine, he just needs a home. He showers in his clothes every day. He definitely needs more support than just a home to live in. But they know that if they said he did, someone would be less likely to house him.
Wow, that's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's really difficult, because you are right that the providers are geared up to provide help with care, more help individuals progress the ladder of property to eventual ownership. It's a step that some people fall on hard times or need to be in emergency housed or through asylum seeking safe refuge, and that's social, then on to affordable, then into potentially private but HMO, housing multiple occupation style, to eventually their own place. It's like a step ladder. Some people, as you say, in that they will require assistance and care forever.
Yeah,
really.
And care costs money.
It does a lot more money than
people have this weird thing about, like, if it's charitable or you're helping people, you should do it for free. There's this weird thing. Like, everyone always says, oh yeah, but you're making loads of money, you don't care about the 1 million people. It's like you are allowed to do both. And I think you look at when people say about care, those carers have to be paid. They have to put food on their table. They're not going to do that charitably and not have any money. So their wage costs money, and the better they become and the more experienced they become, they should be paid more.
Definitely. Well, care is a profitable industry. There's private equity people in care, and when private equity is involved, there's money there. That's why they're there, to get a return, an IRR, internal rate of return, or multiple on their equity. So no, I agree with you. It's a profit has a dirty word, especially when it comes to social housing. We're a for-profit development company specialised in social and affordable housing, and we've been involved in developments before with the client's employer's agent asking us to tell us what our margin is, and wants to make sure it's below 10%. And then I'm saying, we've just come through some of the worst times in the industry where costs went up 30%. If you're on a sub 10% margin, now I'm not saying we're on a 30% margin, I mean that just wiped everybody out. We're never going to be on a 30% margin or anywhere near that. That's like private development standards. But still, if you're on a 8%, 6%, 7% margin, and anything happens in development, your margin's gone, disappeared. So it definitely is still the case, really. If you seem to be making a lot of money in the sector, people don't like it. It's because they don't like associating profit with social.
But it winds me up, because the people that are moaning about this stuff, like, they're not going out and helping people for free. And they haven't helped anybody. So it's like, why can't we help people and make a business? My idea with the 1 million people is that we don't need the investors eventually. Our business will be self-sufficient with the rents that we receive, that we can then reinvest continually, and that's how that's going to end up. We will no longer need the external investment, and the portfolio itself just reinvests.
Right, okay. So because that's interesting, because social housing, especially in recent years, has attracted a lot of private money. They've got for-profit housing associations now. And there's these funds purely, set up to run these for-profit RPs, build a portfolio, and potentially sell the portfolio on at like a compressed yield and make money that way. So from your perspective, do you think the government, for social housing, do you think it should be predominantly government funded or private funded?
I don't think it matters.
As long as it gets done.
Who cares?
Yeah.
As long as it gets done in mass and we can actually fix a problem. Because again, that's the other thing, landlords get told that we're the waste of space and that the government should do it.
Yeah.
Go and look at what the government's done historically. Not built enough homes, substandard.
Yeah.
They haven't got enough resource or knowledge of the industry to know how to manage tenants effectively, which is why you're seeing mould and genuinely dangerous repairs not being done correctly, because they do not have the resource.
Yeah.
Regardless of how much taxes we pay.
No, definitely. And here's a question: do you think we will ever solve the housing crisis?
No.
The social housing crisis?
No, I don't think so. Because I can't see it happening, especially with the planning laws in place at the moment.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest way of fixing it, is by putting people in place that actually know what planning is and how it works. Because the people that are making the decisions are just like the old butcher from the village who's going, actually, I don't want that in there because I've been here my whole life. They don't have any real understanding of what's required and what's needed. Like we were saying off camera, people want more houses to be built, just not near them.
Well, that's a big thing we found. It's with private developers typically get plans objected to anyway, because people don't really want new developments coming to their area, even though the house they're on was previously, wherever you live, farmland, greenland. Anyway, they don't want new houses coming to the area with it. But then when you put an application forward for 100% social housing, you get even probably 10 times more objections. Because of that that inherent stigma, they automatically assume the worst. And we've had applications with 40 homes in the estate and 1,000 objections somehow. I don't know, but every development we've done has tons of objections based on social housing. But I guess with your model is because it exists in blocks and you don't need planning consent. You don't really need any consents, really, do you? You don't have that much of the problem. But is part of your perspective, are you going to go into development, or are you going to carry on just scaling through leases?
I was talking yesterday when we went to our biggest block we've ever done, which is 200 units, and I looked at that and I thought, do you know what? No, I don't want to do it. Yeah. That's just stress and hassle, and I'd much rather. I wish when I started that I did the same. So my first ever project that went well with no experience whatsoever was an old Victorian house over 4 floors that was 4 flats. We renovated, put the kitchens in the living room, and that went really well.
You converted the house to flats?
It was already in flats,
so you refurbed
but a freehold.
Flats?
Yeah, we refurbed and put the kitchen in the living room, created an extra bedroom. Went perfectly well, nice and simple, if I'd have just continued to do that and that was my model, I'd be flying. Yeah. But I didn't. I went, boom, let's go big, let's try and do this. And I think there's a natural feeling of like, especially in property, you start with a 1-bed flat, you go and you end up doing massive blocks and all these big projects, and I just think nobody thinks enough about whether they want to do that or whether they're doing that just because ego. Again, I can tell everyone look, that's mine. Yeah. And I'm at the point now where I just can't be asked with what I know will be stress and hassle when I can just do smaller stuff on more scale.
Makes sense. If it's working, don't try to fix it.
Unless you want to do it for me, we'll fund it for you. Sorry, you tickled me there. You can do the hard work.
Yeah, because you're right. It is really hard. But as you mentioned, we spent a lot of time now building this business model, and it is difficult and very challenging. But once you become good at it, which obviously is our goal is to be the best at what we do, and you finally get it working, and it starts working, you just carry on going, don't you? You scale it and you try to achieve that.
Yeah, everyone has their niche, don't they? And you're going to find what you do relatively easy now because you've done it for so long, and
it's the team,
you know how to.
A good team, though. It's the team. For me, if it was left to just purely me, it would fail. I require. This business is complex. We have a lot of problems. It was predominantly uncontrollable issues. The planning, as you said, I agree with you. Planning reform came about and generally made it easier. For us, it takes on average nearly 2 years to get planning permission. We build faster than we can get the legal consent. that in itself is a huge barrier to new homes coming in. If you can't bring new homes into the system, then everyone's competing for the existing stock. If everyone's competing for the existing stock, those that can't afford the stock, because the price is now rising because of that, both in rental and appreciation for purchase, those in the bottom quartile cannot afford to rent or buy. So now they're more and more prone to be homeless, which then the government have to kick in and help those, because it cannot be seen to increase homelessness and really help. So now they take those people and put them into hotels, B&Bs, and you start having all that cycle, and really the top of it all is fucking planning.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You did it now.
I did, because it's frustrating. So the top of it all is planning.
Yeah, so question then, is that what you think, is that why you think property prices continue to rise and so do rents? Because we get a lot of people thinking that landlords are the problem, that we just decide that the costs are there, but the costs are...
We live and operate in a free market to some respects, and landlords can at the moment just up there. I could go and advertise one of my properties now for £3,000 a month if I want to in South Wales. I'll just put an open rent and it'd be there. But people won't rent it because they can't afford it and they don't want to pay that price. But the problem is these incremental increases, when there's a lack of stock and you're going to up your rent by £50 a month, somebody who's in a job will just pay that £50 a month just to get in that place.
Yeah.
Whereas those people that all their income pretty much derives from benefits, there is nothing else they can do to basically get £50 a month effectively. So they cut out. They can't do it. And if you look at the local housing allowance rates versus market rent, they are wildly apart. Like in one of our areas, the local housing allowance, which is the government social rent standard for one bedroom flat, is like £450 a month. In that same area, you cannot rent a one bedroom flat for less than £750 a month. So from a percentage rate, why would any, you can. And when my mortgage has gone up to above 400, because you cannot, what they fail to remember is if you're doing a remortgage or a new mortgage, or even if you've got a portfolio mortgage with covenants, your bank will have in there as a covenant a rent coverage ratio. And that will say your rate is 5%, your ratio is 125%. So therefore, if you've got a 100 grand mortgage and it's 5%, so 5 grand, and it's 125%, call it whatever that is, I'm just going to round it up, 6 grand a year, you have to rent it for 6 grand a year. Local housing allowance doesn't cover 6 grand a year.
Yeah.
Therefore, you'd never get money. Therefore, landlords could not be in the the problem would actually be a lot worse. So, but if you made it easier to bring new stock in from top down, more developments would be done. People would move up the ladder and move out. The oldest, other stock would be introduced. New. A lot more of 106 and affordable would be delivered.
I was going to say, naturally, with more developments come more social.
Definitely. So I've just went on a huge tangent there, but as you can see, planning is the bane of our life, really, and is the biggest problem. I would definitely say it's the biggest problem for building, especially social housing, affordable housing. But Jack, just to finish up then, I've got 2 questions. One question: would you live in the same street as the type of social housing investments or blocks or apartments you're building? Would you live in the same street?
With the same people, yes, depending on the managing company above. Okay. I think that's a really big thing. You can go and rent it. I could start a social housing provider and just go and get random tenants in and not know how to manage a property. And that's a big thing that we're finding with supported living as well. Is anybody can just start one with no experience, and if you don't manage tenants correctly, there is the possibility of it being a nightmare. Same any standard HMO, we've had nightmare tenants that are professionals.
Me too, yeah.
And because we've not managed it correctly or put the right people in the right rooms. So yes, with the right provider that is actually managing those people internally.
Okay. And the second one is that if anybody was interested in this sector and wanted to know more about it and what to do, what would be your advice?
Come talk to me, or you. Probably more you, actually.
Well, from a development point of view, or construction, and then I'll tell you not to do it. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, I mean, we've also partnered with a company called Supported Living Gateway, and they have got a wealth of knowledge, decades of experience in that stuff. So if I ever have a question, I go and speak to the guys over there, and their website's full of really good stuff as well.
Great.
But yeah, just ask away. Like on my social media, if you've got any questions, then then ping it over and I'll do what I can.
Great, and if you listen to this, then you'll find in the description all the links to Jack's social media pages and his website for the social housing group. I hope you've enjoyed it, Jack. Thank you so much for speaking to me and answering all the questions. We could talk for hours, but it's time to wrap it up.
Thank you, mate.